by becoming rich.
Take all your money, buy Bitcoin.
I say when we sell.
Wake up every morning and say GM.
GM to a fucking massive Bitcoin inflow day. BlackRock alone, over $1 billion. As we broke through 77, 76, touched 77. Or did we touch it? Not quite. No, 76.9. So GM to that, I mean, $1 billion of inflows into BlackRock whenever the market just goes sideways. So I think it's pretty important that it continues almost immediately. So there's a couple of paths I'm thinking of at the moment, which I will run through here. If we are going to see an immediate pump, I think that it probably just continues from here. And you see price running away from the bands and just sort of following them all the way up into an eventual top. And when the bands break, that's the time for your pullback. So Bitcoin just follows the bands aggressively and then it breaks through. And that's when you're going to see a bit of a pullback as it comes back to consolidate and refill all of this. So essentially, if we're going to see chasing, if we're going to see now this, Bitcoin strategic reserve narrative and countries thinking about buying and people trying to front run that, right? So there is no strategic reserve yet. There are no major countries announcing that they're buying Bitcoin yet. But of course, by the time it gets announced, if it does get announced, that's when you want to be actually selling, not buying. Sell the news. Buy the rumor, sell the news. It doesn't matter if it's the US, it doesn't matter if it's Saudi Arabia or whoever. It's the same thing. You want to pre-position in anticipation of this new buyer or this next buyer. And then when they buy, you exit. So that'd be one of the paths I would say would be if we have an aggressive trend from here. It would be if we go aggressively higher, you probably just see no pullback, but you top slightly sooner. So you trend through until like December, basically a month or so from where we're at right now. And then you actually see a sell-off into some kind of a retest. This is not meant to be like time specific, of course. And there's other paths that it can take. Most notably, there is a path it can take where this was the final push. And that final push leads it down into a consolidation and reaccumulation at these lows. And then it rallies further from there. That's not impossible. I mean, that would certainly be max pain. There's certainly be a lot of fuckery in that because I think most people now are betting that this breakout will hold. But really, until Bitcoin loses 73, its previous all-time high, this just double top all-time high, until Bitcoin loses this level and really falls into that lower range, you have to just expect this to be a confirmed breakout. Yesterday's candle follow-up would point in that direction too. It wasn't like this massive further continuation, but it was a green candle, and it looks like Bitcoin might be starting one of those just grinding higher, upward sloping accumulation type of moves, where people are just buying and buying and bidding and bidding. Then when that runs out, I think eventually it will come back to retest all of this. So you have an inefficiency getting left behind as people buy. Then you run out of demand in the short term. It comes back to retest where the last known demand was. It gets bought, it holds, and then away it goes. And at this point, retest. Hopefully everyone's saying that, oh, bull market's over. See you in 4 years, blah, blah, blah. That's one potential path. If that happens, you want to follow the fast trend, green bands. And that's the shallow pullbacks. Really, almost no pullback, but not major impulsive candles. It's very much this kind of grinding higher price movement, like a little bit like we saw back in the ETF trade. Similar to this, where it's just going higher and higher and higher and higher, and it's really like difficult because it seems like it should drop, but it's not dropping, and it's not even quite hitting the bands, and away it goes. That sort of thing. And if that happens, that shows money's just flowing in steadily into Bitcoin, and you'll probably see altcoins significantly outperform. And then when you see some kind of an altcoin top signal, which may be ETH, right? Because ETH now has some inflows. GM to ETH, finally. Small, relatively, 52 and 79, but that's pretty big for ETH in its historical trend. Apart from its first day, ETH hasn't had anything over 100. 98, and that was it, I think. 62, 58, 48. So now we've got 52, 79. I bet today will be over 100. And I would say if you see more of these higher inflow days, and then you see some kind of large inflows into ETH, maybe that comes along with ETH. This is the BlackRock ETH ETF. Maybe if it reaches back to its all-time high, which is here on the ETF launch day. So the all-time high of the ETFs obviously is the launch day. And that's also a point of control of this entire move down. So ETH is coming up to the value area low, previous value area low, from all of that consolidation. That's the next level to watch on ETH. Probably some chop and resistance around there. But if it gets through that, I think it's going to run towards that level. Now, if ETH runs towards that level, and this path is not supposed to be time specific, obviously, but if ETH runs to that level, and you see abnormally high inflows, that might be a sign of a local top for ETH itself. We'll see how that goes. Obviously, it needs to get through 3K for that to be on the table. But I would be watching the ETH A, which is the BlackRock one. Very similar to Bitcoin's in that it started off with selling. So you had sell the news on ETH, you had sell the news on Bitcoin. Now, because Bitcoin's ETF was much faster moving, you had to sell the news, but 3 weeks later it was at new highs. This is functionally the same. It's just taking longer. Opens, sell the news, consolidate, move back up. Breaking above here is the key thing. It's broken above. Same as Bitcoin. Bitcoin, sell the news, comes down, consolidates. But once it started to break there, where was it going? It was going towards its previous all-time high on the open day. So don't be surprised to see ETH trending its way through to that level. That is the target. Now, whether it goes beyond it, like Bitcoin did or not, I think that's a pretty clear and obvious target for ETH. And is why ETH has probably some potential upside and potential to outperform in the near term. There's one other path I want to look at on Bitcoin. And let me see, what else have we got? That's it. Another path for BTC that I could see. And I've marked a couple of things here, like the next Fed meeting is here and Trump's inauguration is there. I don't know if they'll mean much. They'll probably have some relevance. The inauguration especially will probably rally into Trump's inauguration. So again, not predicting this path, of course, because you never can. But just looking at this, we'll see this. All right, so I've got another path here somewhere. Where's my other path? There we go. This would be the more hyper bullish scenario, which would be an extended rally. And if you have an all-time high break like this that has more consolidation, so let's say we push further to about 80 and then come back and consolidate and then run again in December, that would have been my original plan, which is that timing-wise we start to run more in December. I think because of the election win and all the bullishness and all the bullish propaganda and all of that's very valid, I wouldn't be surprised to see Bitcoin continue to about 80 for the next week or so, and then alts continue to run for a couple of weeks while Bitcoin cools off, and then everything pulls back, Bitcoin holds, alts pull back a bit harder, and people think, oh, that was it, that was alt season, it's done, and then Bitcoin really kicks into gear. I think the thing to watch here, if it does, is the 1221, it will lose that trend. So if Bitcoin has a consolidation for more than 2 or 3 weeks, I think the level you want to watch from a moving average perspective would be the 50 EMA. That would be the level I would expect to see Bitcoin hold at, if that's going to be true. So if Bitcoin is still hanging around here as we go through November and people are getting frustrated, watch for that 50 to catch up. As soon as that 50 gets above the old all-time high, that's a really bullish sign. As long as it holds it, that's going to kick on from there. And then I think your fast trend begins. And then it breaks out from there, and you see Bitcoin just grind all the way till about Q1, let's say going towards March. That would give it the typical kind of 6-month rally from the September lows all the way to about February. Last year we did October lows until March. Something similar, I would expect, with some volatility in between. But the main thing to look at would be the fast trend, the green bands, and then the slower trend, the EMA. If it's not going to stay on the green bands, if it's going to reach any of these EMAs below, it is going to consolidate. Because the pullback is deeper. To get as far as this 50 EMA, it has to pull back deeper, therefore it most likely has to retest before breaking out. Right? So if it pulls back towards that 50 EMA, that would be a pretty sharp sell-off. That would be like 80 down to 74. Be a lot of short-term liquidations there. So it would retest either side, most likely, and then have to hold and break out. The way that you're not going to see that is the original first path. So essentially, you're either going to see Bitcoin have short dips as it just continues higher, or it's going to have a proper pullback, which then leads to some kind of consolidation before the next breakout. So this is your best chance to get on board for a position, because you'll probably have a few weeks to fill it. This is where you have to follow the short-term trend. Those are the two paths I see right now. Of course, there are bearish paths, but none of that kicks in until we lose this level. So until we lose that level, nothing to be considered on. Consider bearish paths. Right? And when I say bearish, again, I think that would mean it flushes all the way back down to here initially, probably chops sideways for a bit, probably sweeps those lows, and then builds its way up after. Right? But again, this is a breakout. I think the breakout's going to hold, and I think we should be looking upwards on these moves. So that's Bitcoin, that's ETH. Sol looking good, coming through 200. I would be watching. I mentioned these sharp dips into the order blocks below from election day. I don't think Sol needs to follow this path. It wasn't meant to be a path projection. However, if it meets resistance here and falls back and you see it back below 190 and then it starts to go back below 180, keep your eyes out below, because if it doesn't hold the blue box, it's going to flush. This is meant to be a very sharp leverage wick that gets bought up heavily. We'll see how that goes. I still think there's many more days needed for leverage to build up for that to be the case. You have to understand, the chasing, the FOMO, the leverage, if we're looking at open interest, it'll be happening above these current levels. So just take Sol as an example. This part, election day, I don't see that necessarily as being, we call it dumb money, right? I think that's a legitimate breakout as Solana breaks above its previous highs, as Solana has cleared above those highs. And so the flush I would expect to see would be of the shorter term stuff, if there was going to be one. So nothing up to here. I think all of that is fine. But this part, this second push, this second wave, which has added another 20% to the open interest, another 550 million. That kind of level of chasing, if we go higher and then it starts to stall out, you could see all of that getting flushed and then Sol going into a reaccumulation there. I think that's more likely than seeing the whole thing retrace. The whole thing to retrace would require probably some real bearish catalyst. Not impossible. I mean, there's many bearish catalysts that could be, but I don't think we're going to see that. I don't think you will see people willingly sell all the way down to 163. I think you can leverage liquidate people to about 180, and I would expect demand to step in there. But you never know. If it doesn't, you're looking out for deep wicks into here that get bought up really quickly. I've shown this a bunch of times, but this is the best example, right? Deep wick down into this level here that gets bought up really quickly. Otherwise, you'll see it just consolidate and hold, right? So like, for example here. So this time when Sol broke out, there was no deep wick and there was plenty of gaps below. Whenever this daily sell-off was happening, it could have easily wicked all the way down to here, and yet it didn't, right? It could have went all the way down to there, but it didn't. Why? Demand. Plenty of demand sitting in there, and we just had a flush. We haven't had a flush really, but we have had deep sell-off. So we've had traps, we've had pullbacks that make people capitulate, The next pullback I don't think will be a multi-day slow sell-off. I think it'll be a fast wick, much more like this. Question is just how deep does it go? And the two areas to watch for that would number one be just a standard support resistance flip, so anywhere in the blue box, and if it gets really deep into the green box. But like I said, I think this is time for these coins to accelerate away. Solana built up this nice low, high, higher low, higher high, and is accelerating off from that. So I think it's going to most likely continue. I did have 200 marked as an idea for somewhere that Sol could slow down and start to be outperformed by ETH. But you want to keep an eye on Sol ETH for that, and there's no bearishness on Sol ETH until this low breaks. That's that low I mentioned, daily BOS. Until Sol ETH would break below here, like that shows, right? Until it breaks below that level, there's nothing really to be overly concerned about. Gold, I think the rotation from gold into Bitcoin is in progress. Not that people are directly rotating into Bitcoin from gold, but if you look at the Bitcoin gold and the gold Bitcoin chart, I've talked about this all year, or not all year, like all summer. Now this is breaking to new lows. It looks like Bitcoin is set for more outperformance against gold, and the same with the Nasdaq. So Bitcoin had its really big runs against the Nasdaq and against gold throughout late 23, early 24. We had all of this year where Bitcoin was underperforming, and now it's ready to outperform again. Where that will go next. What else? Stable coins are flowing in again. All right, new all-time high in stablecoin market cap. So money's flowing into the market, which makes sense. And was there something else? Bitcoin dominance is starting to pull back. Yeah. Election could be a top for Bitcoin dominance. Keep an eye on that. And there was one other thing. And ETH BTC. ETH BTC is now seeing its attempt to rally. So you want to see it reclaim this 50 EMA. ETH BTC has not had a daily close above the 50 EMA since all the way over here in July. So you want to be watching for that. This 50 EMA has provided resistance. The bands have stayed red all the way. So if you start to see ETH BTC closing above the 50, that's a sign it's probably going to trend through these bands, probably to the top one, then drop back. And it will start to narrow this band compression, right? And then it will chop around in there as the bands try and cross finally into a daily uptrend, which will probably take it through into end of the year. So keep an eye on that for continued outperformance by ETH. Now, what's happening across the market? Funding rates for Bitcoin, it's all back above neutral now, so we're seeing a little bit of froth coming in. It's Friday, so I think we should probably have a strong end to the day, end to the week, I should say. We probably should see a bullish Bitcoin. I mean, you really want to see a bullish New York session today. After 1.3 billion coming in, you don't really want to see Bitcoin stalling out much more. So from a lower time frame perspective, which I'll do on Trade of the Day, I think you want to see Bitcoin close above 77 today, just make a new high. It doesn't have to go to the moon, but you would like to see it close with another daily high for IBIT. So if you're looking at IBIT, you definitely will be wanting to see this. We had a good Thursday after a breakout Wednesday. I think you just want to see it close again above here. So if the daily candle today looks like that, that's good. If it closes lower, slight cause for concern, and you would expect to see maybe some chop going into next week. That is it. GM. Casual Fridays is the stream today, 5 p.m. UTC. See you then.